My name is Rebecca Johnson, and I love Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. And I am publishing a series of videos exploring the reasons why I am such a fan of Zack Snyder's film. In this series, you'll find my thoughts on topics that matter to me, like Larry Fong's cinematography, character analysis on Lex Luthor and Lois Lane, the Christian imagery, what I find hopeful about the movie, and yes, I'll address the critical reception. So if you're interested in any of those topics, I hope you will get something out of this series and find out why Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice has had such a profound, heartfelt, and inspiring impact on my life.
This is Lane.
Lois Lane is one of my all-time favorite fictional characters. And Amy Adams just happens to be one of my all-time favorite actresses who is playing my favorite version of the character in any medium. Before I start discussing what I love about Lois in Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, I'd like to first address an interview with Margot Kidder that made headlines around 5 months after BVS's release. When speaking with Hey You Guys, the former Lois Lane was asked, quote, "How badly do you think the recent Superman films suffered due to their portrayal of Lois Lane?" Unquote. In response, Margot Kidder said, quote, "They took one of the best American actresses around, Amy Adams, and didn't give her anything to do. I mean, how stupid is that? They made her what used to be the girlfriend, which kind of ended in the 60s with women's rights," unquote. They didn't give her anything to do? She's just the girlfriend? While I respect Margot Kidder's contribution to the Superman mythos and the character of Lois Lane, I'm going to have to respectfully disagree and take this opportunity to bring up what I think sets Amy Adams' Lois Lane apart from all of the others. She has never been fooled by Clark Kent's secret identity and has never been involved in a triangle for two. Now, some may see this as a betrayal of canon because, hey, it's always been that way. And while I understand that, in 1988, Mark Waid made an important discovery in the DC Comics library that questions that argument. He found an unpublished Superman story from 1940 titled The K-Metal from Krypton, which seems to make the case that Jerry Siegel wanted Lois to learn the truth about Superman and Clark Kent being the same person. But alas, even K-Metal from Krypton Lois Lane was still first deceived by the secret identity. Let's go through a quick recap of live-action Lois Lanes who have been fooled by the secret identity or have been involved with the Triangle for Two. Noelle Neal? Yep. Phyllis Coates? Yep. Margot Kidder? Yep. Though she gets to know the truth in Superman 2 and in the Donner Cut, she is shown as figuring it out for herself. But then in Superman 4, she is mind-wiped for a second time. Kate Bosworth? Yep. Though, since she's basically an extension of Margot Kidder's Lois Lane, this Lois knows that Superman is her son's father because the filmmakers acted like Superman never mind-wiped Lois in Superman 2, and that Superman 3 and 4, in which Lois was mind-wiped again, never happened. Yeah, I know, it's all very confusing to me too. Leslie Ann Warren?
Oh, how I wish I weren't in love with Superman.
Yep. Terry Hatcher? Yep. Though she comes to the realization at the end of season 2.
Who's asking? Clark? Or Superman?
Erica Durance? Yep. But she gets there eventually. Even Dana Delaney's animated Lois Lane was subjected to this nonsense.
The truth is, I'm actually Superman in disguise.
You're a sick man, Kent.
For me, Amy's Lois is the refreshing change that I've always wanted for the character. And her incarnation is the only one depicted as smart enough to figure out on her own that Clark existed as an alien and was in on the secret before Superman was even a thing. Why does nobody talk about this? Say what you will about Zack Snyder and David Goyer, and I know that people do, but the fact that they allowed Lois Lane to be this intelligent and this resourceful in the DCEU is something that should be applauded. Okay, So now that I've gotten that out of my system, one of the things I love about Amy Adams' Lois Lane in Batman v Superman is that she gets things to do. In fact, she is given her own storyline. We get to see her as an investigative journalist all throughout the film. While she is in Africa to interview a general and suspected terrorist, she discovers a bullet lodged inside of her notebook, and it's that bullet that sends her on a quest. Like in Man of Steel, Dawn of Justice shows that Lois Lane is constantly watching the news and reaching out to others who can help her get to the truth. I think that the evidence Lois gathers and the interviews she conducts result in Lex Luthor's incarceration by the end of the film.
I've proven what you've done.
When Lex was announced for Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice, my immediate thought was, if they have Lex Luthor verbally sparring with Lois Lane, they're gonna do this thing right. And I think they did. Her confrontation with Lex on top of the LexCorp Tower was everything I wanted. Jesse playing Lex as if he's checking Lois out was an uncomfortable but accurate choice, because in a lot of Superman stories, Lex pursues a romantic relationship with her.
And do you, Lois, take this man to be your wedded husband from this day forward?
Lois Lane gets the chance to develop connections with characters who are tied to her story. In Dawn of Justice, we see her meeting and going out into the field with Jimmy Olsen, and I thought it was so character correct that they would both stick up for each other when needed.
It's okay, Lois.
Lois continues expanding her association with Secretary Swanwick, who serves as her deep throat informant, which is fitting because Lois Lane and Clark Kent have been compared to Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein.
Let Metropolis know that Lane and Kent are the greatest writing team since, Woodward and Bernstein. And they can read about it in the Daily Planet.
As a Daily Planet fan, I always love seeing Lois Lane interact with Perry White. And my favorite moment between the two of them in BVS is when she asks for a helicopter to Gotham, and even if he wouldn't do it for anyone else, he gives her what she needs because he trusts her.
It's not her story.
Jenny, get her a chopper to Gotham. And forget the heliport. Put it on the goddamn roof. On the roof, Lois!
And side note, I like seeing the ongoing use of helicopters as Lois Lane's favorite non-superpowered mode of transportation. Though in the extended cut, we see Lois using the Metropolis subway system as well. And speaking of Lois Lane and her relationships, I loved how Batman v Superman examined Lois's romance with Clark through her perspective. The trouble for Superman starts because of her. Lex abuses the public knowledge that Superman will come to rescue her by framing him in Africa. That incident causes Lois to question her role in Clark's life.
I just don't know if it's possible.
Don't know if what's possible.
For you to love me and be you.
It's a question many Lois Lanes have asked in Superman stories because it's a fine line to walk. How can Superman be Superman and still have a love life? And how does Lois Lane deal with that? One of the great thematic elements of the movie for me is in relation to Lois's place in Superman's life. Yes, Margot Kidder, she is the girlfriend of Clark Kent / Superman. But she is so much more than that. In the nightmare sequence, we hear an evil Superman refer to a she as his world. And before our good Superman gives his life to stop Doomsday, he tells Lois,
You are my world.
In Man of Steel, Clark chose Earth as his home. But in Dawn of Justice, the people of Earth don't know what to do with him. Lois is the human woman and the constant figure in his life who accepts him for who he is and sees him as the inspirational hero he can be.
Superman was never real. Just the dream of a farmer from Kansas.
That farmer's dream is all some people have. It's all that gives them hope.
As a fan of the original Death of Superman comic book event, I appreciated the engagement ring. In that comic story, the tragedy of Superman's death is that Lois and Clark are engaged at the time, so their happiness is ripped away from them.
End of love affair with man in the sky? Question mark.
I love that Lois puts the ring on, and that the camera shows it to you when she pours the dirt on Clark's coffin. Rings are symbolic of eternal love, with no beginning and no end. So I think it's another sign that Clark will come back. And while we're on the topic, since I consider Lois and Clark to be technically engaged, I wonder if that means we'll see a wedding for them sometime. Is there a Chekhov's ring? Is that a thing? Because it should be. And this might be a bit of a stretch. But in Man of Steel, Superman says,
On my world, it means hope.
so when on my world, meaning Lois, it, meaning the engagement ring, is applied with the context of Batman v Superman, maybe the engagement ring means hope. Just throwing that out there. This is why Lois Lane is important.
Lois! It's Lois Lane! She's the key!
The nightmare sequence seems to suggest that without a Lois Lane, you don't have a Superman. When love, hope, and inspiration are taken from Clark, he has the unfortunate potential to become a murderous tyrant. And as a side note about the Flash's cameo in Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, seeing the Flash breaking the time-space continuum to shout at Bruce Wayne about how important Lois Lane is one of my favorite things in any DC Comics story ever. I've heard and read many comments about Lois Lane in Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, referring to her as a damsel in distress. In addition to pointing out the fact that Lois rescues that damsel in distress known as Superman by pulling him out of the water and throwing herself in front of a crazed and armored Batman. I would also argue that she is one of the strongest characters in the movie. And my favorite piece of evidence would be the Daily Planet headline Perry picks up hot off the presses. Even after losing the man she loved, Lois Lane picked herself up and reported the story. She did it in the Death of Superman comic, and she did it in Batman v Superman. Being able to keep going despite her own personal tragedy is an overlooked aspect of the character that I wish more people recognized and celebrated. As a Lois Lane fan, I've enjoyed seeing Amy Adams' take on the character grow in each movie. And hopefully things will be looking up for her in Justice League.